In lesson 4.3, we're going to start focusing on financial budgeting, and that's going to be the theme for the rest of this chapter. Now, I just want to start out by saying that budgeting honors God. So here we have Luke 14:28 through 30, and it says, "For which of you, intending to build a tower, sitteth not down first and counteth the cost, whether he have sufficient to finish it? Lest haply after he hath laid the foundation, and is not able to finish it, all that behold it began to mock him, saying, This man began to build, and was not able to finish." So here we have somebody who did not plan accordingly, and that can be devastating if you don't plan accordingly, because sometimes you may pour your money into something you can't finish, and when you don't have a finished product, it's basically worth nothing. 1 Corinthians 16:2 says, "Upon the first day of the week let every one of you lay by him in store, as God hath prospered him, that there be no gatherings when I come." So this is actually talking about being proactive with your money and not reactive. When we're proactive, we plan how we would like to spend our money and then spend our money according to the plan. If we're reactive, that means typically we spend our money and then figure out if we have a problem or not, and then if we do have a problem, we then need to figure out how to solve it. Being reactive can be very stressful, so we like to be proactive and not reactive. Proverbs 21:20 says, "There is treasure to be desired in oil and in the dwelling of the wise, but a foolish man spendeth it up." And so what this is really talking about is looking at what we need versus what we want. If someone is foolish, they're going to spend all of their money on the things that they want. And then again, that leaves us in a really difficult position where you may be very reactive because you may not have the money available for the things that you need. So here this is saying spend the money on the things you need first, and then if there's money left over, you can spend it on things you want, but be wise with your money. I would like to focus now on some general budgeting tips for teens specifically. So in this book, you will see a lot of information that applies to once you move out, but there's some very real applications for you as a teenager that you can implement right now to start practicing these good budgeting and spending habits. So first, you need to know what your income is and how frequently you're going to get it. So we've covered already how to determine your income by looking at an hourly wage and how much money you're going to be making. For budgeting purposes, though, you're going to want to know how much money are you getting and when, because the timing is very important for budgeting. You also want to determine the budgeting categories you're going to need. So you're going to have to make sure you set money aside for savings. And as a Christian, we're called to give money, so we want to have money set aside that we can give. We have needs, which I would say fall into this expenses category right here, things we need to spend money on. So that might be fuel for your car, that might be car insurance, it might be clothing, it might be activities that you're required to pay for. Overall, you and your family determine what expenses you are required to cover at this point. And then you also probably have some goals of things you want to save up for. So in my family, we love to snowboard. My kids saved up to buy their own snowboarding equipment. Some of you may want computer equipment or tablets. Maybe you want a phone. Those are things that you may be setting aside money for, or even college. Some of you might be setting aside money for college or for trade schools and continuing education. Those would be goals that you would want to budget for that you can save up for. Next, you're going to want to pick your budgeting strategy. So I've got two of them kind of listed below. One would be pay God first, then pay yourself, which is setting up kind of an emergency savings fund. Next would be cover your needs. And then finally, whatever's left over, you can use that for your wants. And so with your wants, that might even be saving money for certain larger purchases, or maybe you just like to go get a coffee. That would be a want. The next category is the 40-30-20-10 plan. And those are actually percentages. So the 40% is spending money on things you need. So out of all the money you make, your expenses for things you need should not be more than 40%. The 30% is basically things you want. The 20% would be setting aside money for an emergency savings fund, and the 10% is where you give money to God. And then finally, once you've set up your budget, you then start tracking your spending habits, and you would adjust your budget as you need. Now here is an example of a budget. So I show the income that a teenager may get, and I show different expenses that the teenager may have. And I've set this up bi-weekly, which means that it's every other week. And then I also have a column titled monthly estimate. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, but to get this column, what I did was I took the bi-weekly amount and I multiplied it by 2, because typically if you get paid every other week, you'll get 2 paychecks within a month. So how was this budget actually created? Well, first I started with my income. So I'm like, okay, this is the amount of money that I'm getting paid. Next, I took that amount of income and I multiplied it by 10%. And I said that would be my tithe to God. After that, I paid myself. I said, okay, I need to have savings and emergency fund set up, and I'm going to take 20% of what I make and I'm going to put that into an emergency fund. After that, I'm going to budget all of my needed expenses. So in this example, I'm required to pay for my gas, I'm required to pay for my cell phone, and I'm required to pay for my insurance for my car. So those things are things that I have to pay for, so I put those in there next. After that, I budgeted for the things I wanted most. So if I'm saving up for any electronic items, I've got $25 I set aside per week. And then I also have $25 for where I can just go spend it however I feel like. Maybe that's going to the movies, maybe it's going to get coffee, maybe it's eating out, maybe I want to go do something with my friends. That would be the miscellaneous. And then I basically took my income and I subtracted off all of those expenses, and it showed me at the bottom whether or not I was over or under the amount that I budgeted. And so if you go over, then that's not a very balanced budget, and we'll see that in a future chapter. So here I did not go over. I had $10 left over in the month, and I made sure to not budget my expenses higher than my income. All right, so we're going to go on ahead and do a few practice problems as it relates to this budget. So the first problem I have, it says, what is the total amount of money that is being put to the expenses and savings bi-weekly and monthly? Okay, so the reason that's titled that it says expenses and savings is because under this expense area here, I've got kind of a few savings accounts right here that I've got set up where I'm setting money aside. So expenses is money going out. A savings account is money that you set aside, but you really aren't touching it. So it's not like leftover money you can do whatever you want with. This would kind of be your leftover category that you can do whatever you want with. And I'm being proactive, saying I'm only going to spend $25 a week on or every other week on things that don't really matter. So it's a very small amount. So what this is asking us is really how much is this total here that I'm setting aside. And if I add all of those numbers up together, this is $240. Same here. I'm looking at it from a monthly perspective, and this is going to give me $480 is what that's going to give me. So, so on this one, that's what that question is very specifically asking. Now, the next one, we're actually going to work on converting these into different amounts. So it says convert it to weekly amounts and an annual budget amount. And then the next part says, what is your true monthly budget? So I'll talk about that in just a minute. So right now, bi-weekly means I'm getting paid every 2 weeks. So in order to figure out how much weekly is, so I'm going to put weekly, what I would do is I would take the bi-weekly amount and I'm going to divide it by 2. Because this means I'm getting paid for 2 weeks worth of time. To convert it into weekly, I need to divide each one of those numbers by 2. So over here, I'm going to write the header weekly. I'm going to take this, I'm going to divide it by 2, and that's going to give me $125. I'm going to go on ahead and just round all of these up to the nearest dollar because that's what the book does. You could make this $12.50, that's what that would be. If you do this in Excel, you actually will find that it automatically will go on ahead and do all of that for you. And so for me, even though I rounded it, I'm actually kind of adding them all up as they actually would be. So here, this would be 8, this would be 25, I'll just write down 13, but overall, I'm under by $5 a week. So I kind of have an extra $5 I could shove into any of these categories. If you don't spend it, the $5 just goes straight into savings, realistically, or you could put it with miscellaneous. Either way, doesn't matter. Okay, so that's my weekly amount. The next one said to turn it into annual. So to turn it into annual, I'm going to take my weekly amount and I'm going to multiply it by the number of weeks in a year. So there are 52 weeks in a year. And when I multiply that out, I'm going to take this 125 and I'm going to multiply it by 52, and that's going to give me 6,500. I'm going to do the same thing for the rest of these items. I'm going to use unrounded numbers, so basically I'm taking 1250 and I'm multiplying that by 52 is what I'm doing. And I'm going to do that for each one of these categories as well. I'm going to go on ahead and put my lines here. And this would leave me with $260 left over for the year. So $5 a week doesn't seem like a lot, but $260 for the year seems like a lot more. Now this is where the monthly estimate and the true monthly budget are going to differ. So true monthly is what I'm going to title this. Okay, so you probably can guess how I'm going to get my monthly budget this way. If this is for a year, we know that there are 12 months in a year. So I'm going to multiply this by 12. However, when I went from biweekly to this monthly, I multiplied it times 2. That was kind of how I got that monthly estimate. Here's why they differ, is that this now is for 24 pays, is what this is. There's going to be 24 pays, biweekly pays in a year, and that gave us this many paychecks that have gone into this account then in a year, 24 pays in a year. If I take 52 and I divide 52 by 2 weeks, because you get it every other week, that makes 26 pays per year. So you can see here I've actually got kind of 2 extra paychecks. Here, if I base my annual amount off of this, it would only be 24 paychecks, but really I get 26 paychecks per year. And if you look on a calendar, you will see that some weeks or some months will end up with 3 paycheck dates in that month if you get paid every other week. Now, in my family, what we typically do is I don't quite budget off of a true monthly budget. And like I said, to calculate this out, I'm not multiplying it by 12, I'm sorry, I'm dividing it by 12. So I take this, divide it by 12. If I were to set this up as a true monthly budget, I would have, you can estimate these kind of to the nearest dollar. This would be $542 a month, whereas over here I'm saying I only have $500 a month. I really prefer to set my budget up based off of 2 paychecks a month, and I like to have my 2 extra paychecks. And what I like to do with those 2 extra paychecks is those typically will go towards extra things I need to buy. So for example, one of those paychecks goes towards my Christmas presents. You can set money aside every year for your Christmas presents in your regular budget, or you could say, well, I'm going to have an extra paycheck and I'm just going to take everything kind of left over from that paycheck and I'm going to spend it on Christmas presents. Another one would be curriculum. Because I homeschool, I have to cover the cost of my curriculum. And so typically in the summertime, I would pay for my curriculum, and then in the winter, I use it for Christmas presents. For me, that's a great fit. That's not a great fit for everyone. That's just what we do. But in the book, they do talk about a true monthly budget, so that's how you would calculate it. Realistically, I should be able to budget based off of these numbers. If I take each one of these and I divide it by 12, I'm just rounding it. Again, each one of these, I'm dividing them by 12. And there are some families that do budget like this, and that's great. They're allowed. But there would be some families that I would say would budget more similarly to what I said that we do. And if we do this, then we would have basically $22 left over per month rather than $20 left over per month. It's really up to you, but that is how you would do a true monthly budget versus a monthly estimated budget.